Predatory marriage is a term we borrowed from Canada. It was invented in Canada. And it's generally when a younger person marries an older person and the older person has dementia or lacks capacity or is vulnerable in some way. And generally it's defined in Canada as when they marry that person for the purpose of gaining access to their estate upon their death, because marriage revokes a will. But I've done a lot of work on this over the past 8 years, and I've found actually it's not just about that. It's about control. It's about grooming and gaslighting and coercive control. That's what it's about. But they always keep the money. A lot of the cases seem to follow the same pattern, and I've spoken to a lot of cases now. A predator turns up out of the blue being charming. They always call themselves a carer. Sometimes they are actually booked as a carer, but they sort of loom up out of the darkness and they seem very friendly and charming and persuasive. And initially they're very, very friendly to the family. I would say a bit over-friendly. Our predator was the kind who always had his hand on your shoulder and used your name twice in every sentence, that kind of thing. And then they isolate the victim, and that's a big warning sign. I mean, we live next door to my mum, but he still managed to try and isolate her by just keeping the door locked. And we had a key, of course, but he kept the key in the door. And when we went to see her, which we did lots of times a day, he was just, well, it'd take sort of 15 minutes to answer the door and then go, well, I think she's a bit tired. And my mum would never have not wanted to see me, even if it'd been 3 a.m. So, you know, that's a big kind of red flag. It's impossible to overestimate how charming the predators are and how plausible. The families are a lot less plausible. We come over as slightly hysterical. We're all going, he did this and he did that, or she did this and she did that. And if you're listening to the family versus the predator sounds a lot more believable. So that's one of my big red flags, really. The person who sounds more believable is likely to be the predator. And that's not to say that there aren't charming people who loom up out of the blue and marry old people, but there's a pattern that just keeps on and on repeating. It's partly a perfect storm of different factors coming together, really. The first one is the ageing population. There are something like approaching 1 million people with dementia, but I'd say there are a lot more than that because a lot of them are undiagnosed. So that's one thing. But the other thing is the pandemic led to a big increase in all kinds of financial crime and that kind of thing. The internet, I think, is very helpful to predators. Marriage revokes a will, and people don't know that. Registrars at the time of my mother's marriage were not trained in either assessing mental capacity or in safeguarding, and they don't have a safeguarding mindset. I think it is that constant drip feed of your family don't care about you. Nobody looks after you except me. Our predator constantly said to me, everybody knows that you don't love your mother, and when she dies, you will cry crocodile tears. And at first I was just, how could he think that? We've always been the closest family. We live next door. We've always been on holiday together. How could he think that? And then I began to think, does everyone think that about me? And it is gaslighting. It makes you change your whole world picture. I'm sure he drip-fed my mother. For example, one time, one of my friends came over to see me. She had to drive back to London. She would have normally called in to see Mum, but she didn't have time because she had to get back to London. And as she was leaving, the predator came outside with Mum and said, well, aren't you going to come and see Joan? And she said, I'm really sorry, I can't this time because I'm going off back. I've got to get back to London. And he turned to my mum and said, oh, well, Joan, you're probably never going to see this lady again. And that sort of cruelty to her is one of the things they do. And that, to me, is one of the warning signs. For the victims, I always wondered whether he looked after her as well as he told people he did. He paraded her around the hospital when she was being treated for cancer, going, "Look at this old lady in the wheelchair. I'm so looking after her. Her family don't care." There's a lot of that kind of thing going on. The impact on the families is devastating. I have had people in authority say to me, "Oh, well, it was a comparatively small estate." Well, at which point I've taken to saying, "OK, get your checkbook out." But that's not the point to me. That's not what keeps me awake. What keeps me awake is, did he really look after her like he said he did? Because whatever he did, she would have forgotten about. And I think the predators deliberately try to blow the families apart. Luckily, it hasn't worked in our family. I'm still very close to my brother. The predators are really, really convincing, but we just love each other and the family don't care. And they just waved it through. And also, they will have had no idea of the consequences of the marriage. They will not have known that marriage revokes a will. They will not have known that that marriage gave him complete control. He inherited my mother's entire estate, the entire contents of her house, and there was nothing valuable in the house, but there were things like my wedding dress and my granddad's letters from the trenches in the First World War. Just, there was a real sentimental value that I would have liked to have had. But he inherited all of those. And the worst thing, he inherited complete rights to her funeral. So he had no obligation to tell us when or where it was, so he didn't. So we couldn't go. We tracked down her grave by doing a big ring round of the Parks and Cemeteries Department and found it. He's not put up a headstone. We can't put up a headstone because he owns the grave plot. So that patch of grass, to me, is a monument to the complete injustice. And if people knew the ramifications that ensue from such a marriage, they would be a lot more careful before going ahead. I think more information is needed, both about dementia, more safeguarding and legal changes to stop this happening to anyone else. I mean, I'm getting older, we're all getting older, and I can just see the rise in the ageing population brings a huge opportunity to predatory marriage, and it needs to be stopped now.